out. One of my officers who had spent 2 or 3 tours, he was sitting over across from me with his hand in his face crying. And I remember saying to myself, this is the saddest day of my life. And I have not changed that thought. It remains in my memory as the saddest day of my life.
As the last of the defense attaché staff left the airport, the only escape route remaining out of Saigon was from the embassy.
I got on one of the last helicopters out of the DAO. My concern was that my helicopters into the embassy had stopped. And I couldn't get a straight answer as to where they were. So that dictated to me that I should go back to the ship. Once I got on the ship, I walked into the Combat Operations Center and I said, what has happened to my helicopters? Why aren't they flying? And the Admiral said, we've stopped them for safety reasons till we reevaluate what we need to do. And I said, the Marines don't stop for safety reasons in this case. We've got people in there. We need to get them out. We need to get my helicopters moving again. Get in touch with the helicopter direction centers and start to flow.
We recognized perfectly well there were factors such as pilot fatigue and maintenance problems, but nevertheless, you know, that was their business. That's what they were supposed to do, and that was in the plan. And also the fact that the 1st Marines and 1st helicopters had come out 3 hours late rather than at the time they were supposed to began to affect us.
I was constantly in fear of the fact that you could easily run into somebody as you descended through the clouds or they popped through the clouds. The streets were still lit up and absolute chaos with thousands of people lining all streets in and around the embassy. So it was not hard to find. You'd make your approach, you'd land the roof, and literally within seconds, you'd be loaded with 30, 40, 50 people, whatever you could handle, and you'd be gone. It was a very, very quick operation. And then you also had the factor of the enemy. We ran a lot of times with lights out, and your wingman would ask you to flick your rotators on so he could see you. And so that in itself was a bit scary, because we didn't really know what, as the NVA moved closer and you could see them moving, coming towards Saigon, you really didn't know how much you wanted to expose yourself, what they might do.
Cái chuyện mà trực thăng rút quân đi á, thì không bao giờ nghĩ rằng họ có thể bắn. Trừ phi tất nhiên là sự việc khi nào cũng có những cái bất ngờ của nó, là nếu có một cái chiến sĩ nào đó vô kỷ luật.
Tiếng máy bay rất là nhiều, kể cả trực thăng và máy bay phản lực. Nhưng mà chúng tôi biết được những trực thăng này là ở sân bay Tân Sơn Nhất hoặc là sân bay ở phía là cất cánh lên để nhằm mục đích là tiêu diệt cái đội hình tiến công của chúng tôi thôi. Thế nhưng mà chúng tôi nghĩ rằng tất cả các loại trừ máy bay mà đã khống chế trên bầu trời của chúng tôi như vậy thì chúng tôi đều tiêu diệt. Dù là trực thăng hoặc là máy bay phản lực.
Marine that was up on the roof bringing in the helicopter onto the heliolift pad directly on the roof of the embassy had fallen off the back of the parapet and had severely wounded himself. I was confident enough to go up and take his place on the roof of the embassy. The helicopter would come in and it would be furious, 90-mile-per-hour prop blast winds on a very small area, and the delicate maneuver of getting people up the staircase, a very narrow staircase, and escorting them across this heavily wind-buffeted area. In the middle of the night, it was pitch black, and getting them safely into the helicopter, and then a furious takeoff, and then silence.
The CIA station on the top 3 floors of the embassy included people who were specialists in who knows what. We were all heavily armed, and there were weapons lying all over the place. Any Vietnamese in the corridor could have picked up a weapon and blasted us, but they were too terrified. They wanted to get out. The only thing they wanted to do was to get on that chopper, and I couldn't look into their eyes because I wasn't sure they were going to get on.
I wait for my turn, and it seemed never my turn to get on the helicopter. So I tried to get out of the embassy at that time. I report to the Marine police or whatever, and he say, "Are you crazy? Everybody try to get in and you want to get out." I say, "Yeah, because I cannot wait and I must go. I cannot rely on the promise of the American people that promised me, and it's no way that they first priority, I believe that for them, not for us. So I have to find my way, and I get out of the embassy at that time.
By now, many South Vietnamese realized that they were being abandoned. Kim Vinh Lung had been waiting to be rescued for more than 3 days.
When I lost the confidence in being picked up by the helicopters, I was trying to find another way to get out by taking a trip to the riverside to see if I can sneak into any boat to get into the 7th Fleet or whatever the Americans were landing outside in the sea. So I get stuck in the riverside on the night of the 29th. I couldn't get home because so many gunshots.
At about 11 o'clock, I went out down to a river around the neighborhood of the embassy. The crowd grew larger and larger. Some tried to climb over the fence, but there were armed Marines inside. But most of them stood looking up at the helicopters taking off from the top of the embassy building. Tantalizingly. I felt my people were betrayed. I thought, well, this is what my people have fought for. So many people have fallen for. Among them, my friends.
Americans had told them, for example, bring your families to such and such an address and we will have transportation there, whether it was buses or helicopters. And that sadly, all over Saigon, Vietnamese had heeded their American counterparts' advice, had shown up at these various locations only to be left watching the evacuation helicopters fly through the sky as they plied the route between the embassy and the fleet.
Tính toán thời gian tấn công thế nào để mà tất cả 5 cánh đó đều đánh vào những cái mục tiêu quyết định trong thành phố, là 5 cái mục tiêu ở quyết định nhất trong thành phố, và cùng một lúc phải chiếm cho được 5 mục tiêu đó để có thể chiếm thành phố nhanh nhất, mà kẻ địch không còn có cách nào để bố trí phòng ngự, không có cách nào để phá hoại.
About 9 o'clock in the evening, I paid one last visit to the ambassador in his office. There were reporters sitting around, some old friends of the ambassador's, and they were boozing it up.
There were, a half a dozen people in the office. The consul had gone next door and had brought back a little bottle of gin, and another one brought in a little bottle of scotch, and somebody broke out some paper cups. And so everybody was having a drink. It was a wake. It was not a party. Don't misunderstand me.
And the ambassador was moving like a zombie through his day.
And I went over and spoke to his secretary, Eva Kim, and Ambassador Martin. About 10 o'clock, one of the great closing lines in history in my book, he came out of his office and he turned to Eva and he said, Miss Kim, I don't think I'll be having any more dictation. I think it's time for you to go.
The Marines began pushing Vietnamese out of the way so we could go up to the embassy roof. And I looked out over Saigon, and I'd been in this town for 5.5 years. It was my home. And the beads of light that were the North Vietnamese army on those highways were drawing closer and closer. I thought I'd never see this sight. I never thought I'd see the surrender.
Ambassador Martin, when I went into his office, his daughter's dog, Nitnoy, who was a French poodle, was tied to the one of the leg of a conference table. And so I had known Nitnoy over at the ambassador's house. I said, Mr. Ambassador, would you like for me to take the dog out? Because somehow or another I realized, and it turned out later to be true, that he was going to leave that dog there. He didn't want to be seen leaving the embassy with a French poodle behind him. That would not have been the visual that he would have liked to leave to history. So he said, Mr. MacArthur, I'd appreciate that. And as soon as the chopper left the pad, you could look out over that whole northern side of Saigon, areas where I had been, I knew well. It was tragic. You wanted to weep. Oh, I don't like to remember it even now. Vietnam was going down the tubes. Everything that you had covered for the previous 10 years, things that you'd experienced, a lot of friends were down there. So it was a tragedy, a very personal thing.